I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Today is Monday, August 22nd, 2022. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Monday, we call it governance from the neighborhood level or governance at the neighborhood level. And I think I introduced the show properly. If I didn't, I meant to say welcome to the conversation. We're rebranding, retooling, taking this experience and project to another level. So welcome to the conversation with Al McFarlane. And the intent is to be fresh and to invite you all to support, to connect, to be part of this experience. We proceed every day with the conversation with my colleague, Brenda Lyle-Gray. Brenda Lyle-Gray joins me from New Mexico. Brenda, how you doing, my friend? Now you're muted.
Got it.
There we go. How you doing?
I'm fine. Hope you had a good weekend.
I had an excellent weekend. Everything was kind of uneventful, and that's always good.
Spontaneous.
With family, so it was really good. You know, we've got our friends and colleagues from the Hawthorne Neighborhood Council, Dee Phillipps and Diana Hawkins here, and they have been partnering with us with this idea of governance at the neighborhood level, helping us connect with thought leaders, energizers, people with principle and purpose, and facilitating wonderful engagement, wonderful conversation. We hope that there are those who are listening in other neighborhoods in Twin Cities, particularly the Jordan, the Camden, the Corcoran, and Powderhorn, and other communities where our people are, that they will be part of this process of talking about what it means to build community, what it means to elevate and celebrate neighborhood interaction. Diana, good to see you. Dee, good to see you. How are you both doing? Come on camera here. Diana, how you doing, my friend? Hey, Dee.
Hi. I'm fine, Al. Hi, Brenda. How you doing today? Hi, Dee.
Hi.
What's up on Diana? Anything new over the weekend? How was your weekend?
Well, actually, let me tell you, I don't know who all attended the Healthy Life on Broadway, but that was very successful. And there was an event over at North Commons that was successful. And from what I'm understanding, it was very quiet. So it was good to hear that.
Mm-hmm. I sent a photographer up, so we'll be using our paper to help promote the success of that event. And glad to be able to do that. We had a great conversation on a couple of occasions last week with Tito Wilson, who organized that event. Dee, what's up with you? What's new with you?
Oh, not much.
How was the weekend?
Just fine. Nice and quiet.
Good. That's the way you want it.
That's a good thing.
That's the way you want it. Well,
I do want to throw that plug in there, Al.
Sure.
We're still collecting backpacks till the end of this week. And then September the 10th, we're going to be giving these backpacks away. The kids could get vaccinated for school. Adults could get vaccinated. They could get lead testing. They can get their blood pressure test taken. So, September the 10th is the day from 10 to 2 at Hawthorne. Come on over.
At the office, yeah.
There we go. Well, I want to thank you, Diana, for reaching out to our friend Larry McKenzie. Larry McKenzie recently retired as a coach and educator at the Minneapolis Public Schools, but he's much more than that. Let's have you and me talk about him first before we bring him in. What's Larry mean to you, Diana?
Whoa, Larry and I go way back out, kind of like you and I do, you know, and I met Larry in a strange way. I met him through one of the kids' cousins, and then it was interesting because he worked with my son and then he worked with my grandson. So Larry and I have a history, and I can honestly tell you that I am very pleased to know someone that's that educated, that's an author, that's a teacher, that's a trainer, you know what I mean? He's a father. And to have someone of color out here in the community giving back to our youth like this, and even though he's retired, he's still giving back, through his speeches, through his motivation. So to know someone like that, I'm telling you, it's very pleasing.
Well, I have the same feeling as you, Diana. Larry and I go back. I can't remember when we first met, but it must have been in the 70s or early 80s. And I've just known him as you say, an educator, an organizer, a community leader, as an elder, as a motivator, and as a man of principle, a man of vision, who, among other things, envisioned what championship could mean for individuals and for community, for our schools. And he's produced championship teams out of North High School. And we'll talk about that. Let's bring Larry McKenzie in. Larry, my friend, how you doing, man?
I'm well and honored to be here and pleased to be in the company of such great people. As you both said, Diana and Al, we go way back. Al, and you're right, early 80s. And I think he was somebody who meant a lot to me, John K. Cameron, that introduced us back.
Right. Okay.
Actually, Al, you know what? You're probably right. Probably going back into the 70s, because I think I was an undergrad when John K. Cameron might have put me in the car and thought I should meet, some people that was important to the community. And so, yes, it's been, woo, I'm getting up there. It's been a long time.
It's been a minute.
Same with Diana. Yeah. I mean, our paths have crossed over the years in terms of, and she talk about me, but I also like to, I think it's important to give people their flowers while they're here. And so, her work, her commitment to this community for such a long time. It's a lot of people that say they care. They talk the talk, but it's a difference when you see people who actually walk the walk. And I know the love for this community, and I know the work that she's put in, and I know that it hasn't always been easy. And so what they've done with the Hawthorne Huddle in terms of bringing leaders together to try to make this a greater community for those of us that live in North Minneapolis, I'm tremendously honored to be in you all's company.
Well, let's do this. Let's start by talking about John Cameron, since he introduced us, and it's always good to hear someone's name who was our connection and kind of why we know each other and how we knew each other. John Cameron was my insurance man. He sold me insurance. He worked for Prudential, and I had insurance off and on over the years, and I would not pay attention to it. I never understood, really. I was young and dumb. And had that invincible mindset where I said, insurance is for the chumps. If you think that that you're going to be a loser in life, you buy insurance now because you're betting on your lack of success in the future. And so I was arrogantly stupid. I really was. I mean, just dumb as dumb can be. And I'll go back one step further. There was a brother who owned an insurance company, Glover Insurance.
Yeah.
That's the guy that I owe the most huge apology to, because he approached me before I met John Cameron, and he was the one that I acted stupid in front of, saying in a contemptuous way, I'm so smart and I'm so important and so full of it that I don't need insurance. Boy, was I stupid. And so it was later, some years later, that John Cameron came by and looked at me and said, yeah, you a real fool, but I'm going to educate you. I'm going to spend some time with you. And over time, step by step, walked me through an understanding of what it means to be a responsible human being, and how insurance and using the strategies and philosophies of insurance played into everything I was doing, wanted to do, and was trying to do, and how that set me on course to where the policies I have now are policies that John Cameron hooked up for me way back 30 years ago now. And so I'm grateful for him. So and he invited me to events as well. But talk about John Cameron for you.
Well, in all honesty, I would not be sitting here if not for John Cameron. I met him when I was 19 years old. And I tell people, at the time, coming out of Miami and going to school over in Wisconsin River Falls. Al, I was the kid that I now coach. I was an angry young man with a chip on my shoulder, primarily, to be honest with you, because I like to tell people, Al, I grew up in a 2-parent, single-family household. My dad worked 3 jobs all my life, so he really didn't get a chance to see me play basketball or show up to any events or things that I have. Even though Christmas time, the Christmas tree was always full, or as a family, we took vacations and did all of those kind of things. But it wasn't the material things that I was looking for. It was some of his personal time. And so John Cameron became like a surrogate father to me, and got me all the way through college as a mentor, constantly pouring into my life. And I like to tell the story is, a lot of what I've done as a coach is simply me trying to find a way to pay him back. And I say this, Al, so my first job was with Prudential as well, because of John K. Cameron. But this man literally put me in his car. He drove me to every single interview that I had. He taught me how to dress. He taught me so many things. But the essence of the story is this, is that anytime we went out to lunch, anytime we went out to dinner, he never allowed me to pick up the tab. Never allowed me to buy him a Father's Day gift. Never allowed me to buy him a holiday gift. His comments to me was always this: Mac, all I want from you is when the time comes, I want you to allow other people to stand on your shoulders the way that you stood on mine. And so what I do today is just a way of me trying to pay back John K. Cameron for everything that he did for me, as I stood on his shoulders for quite a number of years. So I'm just trying to pay back a man that allowed me to stand on his shoulders. And now I'm providing that opportunity to other young men and women to do the same, to stand on my shoulders the way that I stood on his.
Sean Lewis has put a note in the chat here with a URL, https://coachmckenzie.com. Maybe, Vosh, you can pull that up and we can go into that over the course of the interview. And for those who are listening on any of our social media platforms, if you've got a mentorship story, a relationship story that this conversation relates to, we'd love to have you involved. Vosh is going to put in the StreamYard URL as well, and you can log in and he can talk with you or chat with you offline. That if your story is one that we think would be appropriate and consistent with this conversation, we'd love to bring you on the screen in this conversation. And so Larry, it's about you and me sort of testifying about the role of having elders in our lives. And we both focused on one man, John Cameron. But I know the truth of the matter is we both have been influenced by a lot of people. And you started off talking about your, being a product of a 2-parent household, but still a single-parent household because your dad worked so hard. Talk about your family. I love this conversation because I ask my guests, my friends, to deal with the question of lineage. How far back do you go on your mom's side, on your dad's side? And what is your sense of all of the ancestors that have poured into the generations in front of you that have poured into you to make you the Larry McKenzie of 2020?
So Al, there's so much there. So just a little bit about me. I mean, right now I'm in the process of really trying to. I just did the ancestry thing, DNA through African ancestry to figure out the tribe. But what I do know on my
did you get results yet?
I'm waiting on my results right now.
I did ancestry, and I did 23andMe. I did them both. But go ahead.
Okay. And so, but what I do know just through my own research, going back on my father's side, that my grandmother, who happened to be Olive Wright, her family was, so my grandmother's from Eleuthera. in the Bahamas, and my grandfather's from Cat Island in the Bahamas. And so as a Wright, her family was owned by the Wright brothers, who had a summer plantation in the Bahamas that they would bring slaves from South Carolina over to the Bahamas.
The flying Wrights.
Yeah, the flying Wright.
Flying Wrights, okay.
Airplane. Yeah, let
me just say something quickly here. You know, that's so amazing how our families connect. And you're saying that those people were the ones that were the owners of your family. And that blows me away, but it shouldn't. And it reminds me of the image of your friend and mine, Saluki Fardon. Remember, you know Saluki?
Yep.
The drummer, right? Photographer. So Saluki's grandparents include, forebearers include Robert E. Lee.
Yeah.
Robert E. Lee, the head of the Confederacy, General Lee. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. So
go ahead.
So my grandparents came over from the Bahamas, and my grandmother was one of the oldest, and so kind of they had this thing going, which we don't do anymore, but every 90 days, so one of the siblings would come over and get situated, and stay kind of in what you would call the family house, and find a job, and then move out, and then they would help support the next person that came over until eventually, not all of them came, but for those that desired to come to the States, came over. So my father was first generation U.S. On my mother's side, I always like to say that
your father was born here or born there.
My father was born in the U.S. So yeah, okay. Know that there's some Native American blood on my mother's side. My great grandmother was a full-blooded Cherokee Indian, and the thing I always like to talk about, like my grandmother had a second grade education. My grandfather never went to school a day in his life. Both of my parents, after some struggles, and I always say my parents met on the campus of Florida A&M University. They left because they had a little challenge of me coming along, and so after I was born, they both went back to school, got their degrees, and my father taught special ed for 34 years. My mom was an elementary school teacher for 32 years. I'm proud to say that I'm the oldest of 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. I happen to be a basketball coach. My younger brother happened to be a long-term football coach. My sister, older sister's a nurse, and my baby sister happened to be an educator as well, going on 30 years with Dade County Public Schools. And so, and I say that to say, because I was to talk to my mom, how my just most recently found out that my grandmother and grandfather valued education so much that they actually sent my mom to a private school in 1955 in Beaufort, South Carolina. And so, I mean, that's carried on through our family. And education has become so important in terms of what we do and how we do it. Myself and all of my siblings have college degrees, and now all of the grandkids, with the exception of one that's 14, also have a bachelor's or a master's degree as well. So education has been a big part of advancing the freedom of my family.
When you think about what motivated you to do Ancestry, what were your thoughts, your expectations? What are you looking to find in Ancestry?
For me, I mean, I really want to find out. I've been blessed to go to Africa a couple of times, and I want to really put a pin in the dot in terms of where, whether it's Ghana or Botswana or whatever it is, Zambia, Zimbabwe, which part of the African continent that my family came from. And I think it for me, it's always important, Al. I just think, it's important to know your roots, right? Because that is the essence of the tree. And so for me, I want to share that I want to share that with my siblings. I want to share that with my kids. I want to share that with my grandkids. I think it's important for them to know where we started from.
Where have you been in Africa?
Oh, I've been blessed. I've done. A few years back, I spent 6 weeks. I was in Joburg. I've been to Cape Town. Spent a significant amount of time in Gaborone, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia. Over the years, I've, in this coaching thing, I tell kids, I mean, you use the game or you allow the game to use you, and basketball have blessed me. And so my trips to Africa have been going to do coaches clinics and camps all around the world. So Europe, Africa, I've been blessed to use this game to give me those opportunities.
Tell me about your Africa stories. What impressions did you come away with?
So the first thing, I really feel very strongly about this. I think any African American need to venture to Africa, and I could just tell you, when I stepped off that Delta the plane in Johannesburg, I literally cried. I felt the spirit of my ancestors, and so for me, just the experience of seeing so when especially like my Bahamian family and spending time in the Bahamas, and I could see the connections. I could see the connection to the lineage of my family as I saw those mothers walk down the street with the baskets and all of those kind of things, because it's a lot similar to as a kid of what I saw in the Bahamas. The food that I ate, the rice, the beans, and all of those kinds of things I could relate to. But the thing that I tell people, my biggest African story is, prior to going to Africa, I honestly thought that I couldn't live without television and, more importantly, ESPN, right? I had to know what was going on. But to be in the country, and, the greatest experience was going out in the bush, really going out and seeing how the people are still living, even in this 21st century, using the restroom in a hole, using leaves, just all of those kind of things. The different food, when you talk about real organic food coming from the fields and all of those kind of things. And the greatest, one of the biggest stories, Al, I was doing a basketball camp. And a lot of times, our kids, they got to have the latest and the greatest. And we're doing a basketball camp, and it's in a dirt field with the basket. And there's two young ladies that came out, and they were sharing a pair of socks. Many of the kids didn't have any shoes, but that didn't keep them from coming to the camp and being engaged. And so these young ladies, they had, one had on the right sock, one had on the left sock, one had on the right shoe, the other one had on the left shoe. And so they each had on one sock and one shoe in the basketball camp. And I just stood there and I cried. And so for me, to be honest with you, so we had taken a lot of extra shoes and uniforms and T-shirts and all of those things with us to give away. I literally came back with an empty suitcase. Mm-hmm. We gave away everything that we had on our trip to Africa. But it was just, and I said that, I say this too, having lived and worked in North Minneapolis, I think our kids need to have those experiences, because for all of those that think North Minneapolis is tough and rough, all you need to do is go into the bush and see how those people are living, but they live and they walk with pride. I mean, we have all of these ideas about Africa. I didn't meet a single kid out that didn't speak at least 5 languages. Mm-hmm. And so I was impressed with that. The kids that do get a chance to go to school, they pay for it. It's not a right; it's a privilege in Africa in terms of education. Where I was. So I mean, there's, you know, I mean, and I often say this now, I mean, we look at our situations and we think about how bad it is. But until you get to see some of the places and spaces that those folks were living in, I was with a team and we took the kids to a pizza place. And there was a young man just standing there watching us eat the whole time. And we finally invited him over to give him a pizza. But as we got done, the food that was thrown away, he went into the garbage can to get that food. Hit both of his parents. He was taking care of both of his parents who was HIV infected. Mm. So they could not take care of themselves. And so he would appear daily at the restaurant to get the food that the people threw away to take home to feed his family.
What a story. What a story. So it says something about how both resilient, but how difficult it can be, but how resilient we are wherever we are around the world. Larry, let me ask you to think about Larry McKenzie at age 5, age 4. How did the world look when you first became aware of the world? What was it like? And I want you to reflect on your life at signature points, from being a 5-year-old to, you know, a middle schooler, to a junior high, to a high schooler, to a college, a young adult, and, you know, to being an adult and family. So look at the segments of your life. Let me bring in my colleague, Brenda Lyle-Gray, and introduce you. Larry, Brenda, Lyle-Gray, and I were in kindergarten together. We both went to kindergarten in Kansas City, Missouri. Sat in the school we were going to go to for kindergarten was in an integration fault line, and it was the last year for the whites, the first year for the blacks moving our community to that part of Kansas City. And the whites, in anger, burned the school. So we couldn't go there. And instead, we ended up going to school in a dance hall. Brenda, meet my friend Larry.
Hi, Larry, how are you?
Nice to meet you, Brenda.
And so, Larry, talk about you know, the world that you saw as a 4-year-old, as a 5-year-old. When you first decided that you were alive and doing things and remembering, what were your first memories of the world?
So Al, I can tell you. So I was born in, you know, I tell the kids all the time, I was born colored. I've been black, and now I was born colored. I was a Negro, black, and African American. At 5 years old, I grew up in I was born in a historical neighborhood in Miami called Overtown. It was the black community. It was, you know, as people talk about Black Wall Street. So I was born in, at that time, the only black hospital in Miami. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't really see people of other colors until, you know, in my world, in terms of recognizing, until I was about 12 or 13 years old. One of my most painful experiences in life that I always talk about, Al, I remember being 9 years old, walking downtown Miami with my father, educated black man with a pocket full of money. Me being 9, my sister being 7. We walk by Woolworth Cafe and we look inside. We see Caucasian people sitting on a stool, eating lunch, having food, and we tugging on my dad to take us inside. We're hungry, and didn't know what it meant at the time, but there was a big sign in the window that said "No colors allowed." And I always say, you know, to this day, Al, and most recently, my mom, who's now 84 years old, I asked her, I said, Mom, you know, if there's one question I wish I would have had an opportunity to ever ask my dad, like, what did he say that day when he came home? I just could have only imagined, you know, I mean, because the feeling of not being able to be a full man that day, 2 kids, hungry, you have the money, but you can't take your kids to sit at the counter. So that was one of the most painful experiences that I had growing up. I remember, as a kid going to the Capitol Theater, all black theater. Sometime we had company with might have a mouse or a rat or two that you have to share your popcorn with. But that was just the way of life in the community. And we would eventually move from Overtown into the James E. Scott projects. And then I remember in middle school as a 7th grader going to Dorsey Junior High School. And, for us, everything was fine. We had the portables and all of those kind of things. And a lot of the teachers and administrators that taught there knew my parents. And so we're on spring break in 1971, spring break in April, and they close our school down. Mm-hmm. And we go back to school. We're now being bused from Liberty City to North Miami, and I'm now attending Thomas Jefferson Middle School. Mm-hmm. And so that was my first real taste of integration and all of those kind of things that come along with that. In the meantime, part of my growing up, when you talk about the 5-year-old, my mother grew up in a small town, 4,000 people, Walterboro, South Carolina. And just to mention the name of Strong Thurman, who was the senator at that time, brought fear amongst the Black people. I remember struggling as a young man because my grandfather often had to respond to the folks that he worked for as Mr. Yes, sir, no, sir, why they call him by his first name, Willie. Mm-hmm. And I remember actually at 14 years old getting in trouble because I asked him in front of the wrong people, like, Granddad, why they're calling you by your first name and you're older than them? Because, we had been taught to respect our elders and you didn't call people by their first name. And so having those experiences, going to the hospital in Walterboro, South Carolina, in the Black side and the white side, not being able to literally, again, I grew up in the tail end of the civil rights movement. So, not being able to drink out certain water fountains. I mean, all of those things existed in South Carolina. And so that was all part of my experience and pain as a child. But the one thing that I tell people, Al, that, for me, that one of the things that my father was really into, he made us read. He made us read. And so he was always making sure that we understood that our heritage was much greater than what they told us that existed was just about slavery. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I really appreciated my dad for, because he talked about the history and we knew about the greatness of reconstructions and some of the Black townships and things that existed in Florida and Black businessmen. I'm Dr. Johnson, my doctor who brought me in, you know what I'm saying? So, within minutes, I saw a Black man who had navigated the system to become a medical doctor. My doctor was Black, you know what I'm saying? And so seeing all of those kind of things, I think the people, I always say you can't be what you can't see. Then I think Diana's heard me say that around her kids as well. And so that's why it's been important for me to give our kids exposure, to education and the opportunities that it can present in terms of visiting college campuses and learning your history and talking about the George Washington Carvers and the Mary McLeod Bethune and having something else to be proud of, and that's the one thing I always appreciate my dad giving me, that I really could walk around and feel good about who I was because I understood the greatness of being a Black man.
So when you went from an all-Black school, your junior high, into a white school, what did you discover? What did you find out?
That all was not equal. You know what I'm saying? Because, you know, and I'll never forget, like, you know, when I was at Dorsey Junior High, and we, you know, taking showers and stuff like that, and the rust coming down the wall and those kind of things. I mean, we just thought that was how it is. So you go and you see better facilities. Now you got an opportunity, different kinds of book, much larger footprint in terms of what the school looked like. So, I mean, in a way, it was eye-opening too, because even in the community, you know, as you saw the houses that existed and all of those kind of things driving in, there was large shopping centers and all of those other kinds of things. So it began to open my eyes as to what was the possibility. As I talked to some of my white classmates, and they talked about, you know, their mom or dad being lawyers and owning businesses and all of those kind of things. And every now and then being invited to a party to actually be able to see what how the other side lived. I saw it, again, as a continuing a part of my education as what could be. It helped me learn to dream bigger things.
When Brenda and I went to school at D.A. Holmes and then Central Junior High School in Kansas City, we were in a neighborhood that was at the advancing edge of integration. We lived on a 28th to 30th Street, I think. I grew up on 28th in Brooklyn, and I know I heard the elders talk about how 27th Street was a major dividing line. So we had lived in a house that was one block into the white people's neighborhood. And in my early years, I believe the next big line was 31st Street. And after that was 39th Street. And after that, by the time I got to high school, it was out where my family lived, out on 45th and 47th Street, a neighborhood called Vineyard Gardens. But my parents decided to send me to a white high school after I finished my junior high. And Coach, the one thing that I remember was, first of all, was the assessment that white people are not that smart. I was not impressed. And so when I got into my English class, they had vocabulary words that the teacher was trying to introduce these young freshmen to. All the words they had were words that Mrs. Irish, I think her name was, at Central Junior High School had drilled us on. I knew every word backwards and forwards, upside down, inside out. You know? And so they started saying, "Teacher, what's this word mean?" White kids didn't know. I knew it. What's this word mean? They didn't know. I knew it. Everything she threw out, none of them knew it. I knew it all. And so the lesson was, number one, somebody was lying to us when they tried to posture as though they had some corner on knowledge about the world. They are not that smart. So it taught me to not be impressed. I'm not impressed. You are a human being like every other human being. You put your pants on the same way I put mine on. You're going to die the same way I'm going to die in time. So I don't have time to be afraid of you, scared of you, ordering my life around your priority and your story. My mission must be to build my own story and to create the world in a way that reflects that I am made in the image of the Creator. What was your thought about interacting with white people the first time?
I think much like you. I mean, so, you know, I was blessed. I mean, I was growing up in a household with two educators. And so, you know, I mean, there was no excuses. And so the same thing, I mean, I'm with you. Like, my greatest discovery at Thomas Jefferson was that these kids, and for me, your Miss Ivy was, I had a teacher by Miss Williams, you know, and I was just sharing this the other day. Like, you know, I had at Dorsey Junior High, I had teachers who would stay, you know, and I'll never forget Miss Williams. I was struggling in math. And so the bell rang, and I'm getting ready to run out because I need to get to basketball practice, right? And she stands at the door and say, "Oh, not today. You know, you're not going to leave here until you know this. And I don't care if it takes all night." you know, but that was the kind of educators that we had back then. So when I go to Thomas Jefferson, I'm with you. I mean, I could walk around and feel real good because to your point, Al, my discovery was the same, that these people were not smarter than me at all. And so, you know, I could sit in the classroom and hold my own. But like you, I went to a predominantly white high school to play basketball, a school much probably like Edina. And the one thing that I noticed in my school, every day around 3:30, everybody would disappear but the black kids. And what I learned is at that time, a number of my classmates would be going to the synagogue after school so that they would be taught, and they, you know, they had this thing, let us never forget the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. And so they were being taught their Jewish history, you know what I'm saying? And it wasn't an option for them. You know what I'm saying? And so that was one of the things to me, you know, that as a people, we've been missing, you know, in terms of community. But they made sure, so they would disappear for an hour and they'd come back and we'd have practice and they'd go on with their normal day. But everything shut down at 3:30 till close to 5 o'clock. And those kids scattered, you know, the synagogue was, you know, block or two from the school, but they all had to go and participate.
That's awesome. Brenda, what are your thoughts, reflecting on our growing up in Kansas City, but the question of, and you're an educator as well, when the three of us talk about our education experiences, what are your thoughts, Brenda?
That 70 years later, we could think about the teachers that influenced us and a principal that would holler down the hall, do you have a book in your satchel? We didn't have book bags. We had satchels. I remember my red plaid satchel. And there had better been some type of reading material there. And, you know, I can just remember the teachers. I can remember their smell, their dress, I mean, it was so personable, and their expectations for us were so high. You know, we weren't expected to fail. And, you know, Larry, we did have freedom schools, you know, on Saturdays sometimes. I don't remember, Al, if it was a consistent thing, but I remember being up on Prospect and there was a teacher who taught, and that was the only time I didn't mind getting up at 8 o'clock on the Saturday, because we knew that we were going to learn something new in this little hole in the wall. But it was about 10 or 15 of us and we loved it. But it's the fact that education was just in us, you know, we had to. It was a necessity and we didn't mind it. We didn't like walking when in the winters and that type of thing, but we didn't mind it. And in our neighborhood, which was called Santa Fe Place, we had people of all different education levels. My parents had 8th grade educations, but my father ended up inventing so much stuff for the post office, he should have been a millionaire, but he so happened to be in his brown skin. But, you know, the memories are great. And the childhood memories and the camaraderie that we still have with some of our classmates. It's beautiful. And it was really good for me because I was an only child. So my friends meant a lot.
You know, Al, I just want to throw this out there because you guys talk about the teachers that you had that were role models. Think about this. From middle school to high school, my father went to school with each and every one of his kids. So that was a struggle for us. Wow. He was in every school. So when we went to middle school, he he transferred back. He left the high school. So he did that for each one of his 7 kids. So could you just imagine your father going to school? He was a fireman back then, which is a person that took care of the boiler. And he wanted to make sure, like you guys said, we got educated because we came from a mixed family. So that was a strike right there back in the early 70s.
So he actually enrolled as a student?
He worked at the schools.
He worked at the schools.
Yep.
A job, okay.
Yep. He worked at the schools. And then when we would get out of middle school and transfer to high school, he would go to high school. The next child, he'd go back. So he did that with each one of his kids because he wanted to make sure his kids were educated.
Amazing.
I think that's great. What a story.
But I think
that's beautiful. And that's the reason you're the way you are with your children and your grandchildren. I like that you take no prisoners when it comes to schooling.
Go ahead, Larry.
No, I was going to say, Al, I mean, when I reflect now being an educator and being involved in the system, when we were in school, there was no such thing as an achievement gap. And part of what Brenda said, because it wasn't allowed. I mean, she made me, when she was talking about your principal, it made me think about Mr. Clapp, who literally stood at the front door and checked to make sure that every black boy that came in that building, that you had a belt on. And he kept
like George Berry.
You know what I'm saying? Mr. Clapp kept a box of belts in his office. So you were, when kids walking around now, you couldn't walk around Dorsey Junior High without a belt on. Your pants were going to be up, those kind of things. But it just, the value. I think about, I mean, I listen to friends here in Minnesota talk about like they never had a black male teacher, and for me, in addition to coming home to a black male educated every day, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Taylor, all those teachers that was in my life that just was, and I don't like talking about role models, that I say was real models, for me, that could have, that I could go to as a young man, and things that I may not even have been comfortable talking about with my dad. They were there for me. You know what I'm saying? And again, like I said, I tell the Miss Williams story, and she had to be out. She was in her 60s at the time. She was an elder lady, but that was the culture of the school. Going back to what Brenda said, one of my mantras is refuse to lose. And I grew up in that environment where the people that was around me, those educators, they refused for us to lose.
Mm. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Even if it meant, you know what I'm saying? And then you left that going into a neighborhood. And I can never forget Miss Johnson, in the corner house on the project, knew everybody. And I don't know how many eyes and ears Miss Johnson had, but everything you did, she could tell your mama. You know what I'm saying? And those are some of the things that I mean, advancement is great, but I think sometimes the core of who we are as a people have been stripped away, and I call it the Amway. We're being, so much time being Americanized that we've lost some of the very things that have allowed us to be great.
Given that, Larry, talk about your experience as a coach and teacher, because you've produced champions. Walk us through your accomplishments.
Well, this is probably the hard part. I mean, for me, I just finished I've been coaching. I started coaching in 1981, and I tell people, so I have to share this a little bit. For me, growing up in a household with 2 teachers, the last thing in the world that I ever thought that I wanted to do was work with kids. I mean, like crazy. But my mentor and friend, who we just buried on Saturday, Clyde Turner, talked me into becoming a big brother. And at the time, you know, one of the things that my little brother and I discovered that we had in common was a game for the love of basketball. So Jules is walking through his middle school, and he overhears the principal and some other folks talking about not being able to have a basketball team that year. And so what does he do? He volunteers his big brother. So that would be the start of my coaching career. I had become a big brother, expected to impact the life of a 13-year-old young man, and my life was forever changed. So I would fall in love with coaching and go on to coach high school basketball. Spent the early years, I was the first coach in Minnesota basketball history to win 4 consecutive state titles. I was the first coach to take 2 inner city schools to win multiple titles, won 2 titles later at Minneapolis North, a total of 6 state titles, 3rd most in Minnesota State High School League basketball history. First African-American to go into the Minnesota Basketball Coaches Association Hall of Fame. But what I'm most proud of is this: in 24 years, when I went to coach at Minneapolis Patrick Henry, the graduation rate for African-American males was 28%. 28%. And I always say that those kids had a greater chance of going to prison than going to college. Over my 24 years as a coach at Minneapolis Patrick Henry, Academy of Holy Angels, and finishing at Minneapolis North, I can tell you that I had 100% of my kids graduate on time. On time. When I left Patrick Henry, our team GPA was 3.4, with 5 Black boys as National Honor Society students. When I left Minneapolis North, I can tell you that our team GPA was 3.5. This year we had all 12 of the kids that was on our varsity team was A/B honor roll. 97% of the kids in the program were A/B honor roll students. To me, my greatest claim to fame is that I've had 100% of my kids graduate on time and 100% go to either a 2-year or 4-year school. 33% of those kids currently have college degrees, and they're contributing in different ways back into this community.
Congratulations. That's impeccable. That's amazing, impressive, and thank you. And so what is it about the rest of the system that fosters failure, that prevents our children and our families from aspiring at the level that you've been able to demonstrate is doable? What is it, Coach McKenzie?
So first and foremost, Al, they don't see our kids as being college graduates. And when you walk into the classroom, and I tell, and being in education and spend a lot of times in different classrooms, there's a difference between teaching a kid to prepare them to go to Harvard, Yale, MIT, and teaching a kid to go to work at McDonald's or Wendy's. The bar is low. And I'm a firm believer that a lot of what I've accomplished is because kids will meet you at the bar. And so if you lower the bar, they'll meet you at that bar. If you raise the bar, they'll meet you at that bar. And so first and foremost, when you don't see our kids going to college, you teach them that way. You teach them that way. And then for me, the other thing that I've discovered, you know, a lot of people like to talk about they say, you know, Black boys or Black people, they use this thing of having a fear of failure. I think the greatest challenge for a lot of our young men, and probably young women too, is a fear of success, scared of being how good you really can be. And so it's much easier to fall into the trap of, so what happens, Al? I mean, you know, because I mean, the MCAs will come out in a couple of weeks and you'll get the story like most of the media around town, and they'll tell us, you know, that our kids are going to failing schools, that they can't read, they can't write. And if you tell me that for 12 straight years, what do you think most of the time? I'm going to start to believe it. Mm-hmm. And that's the outcomes that you're going to get. And so we don't talk about, one of the things that I've never allowed people, I don't talk about the achievement gap. I talk about the opportunity gap, the lack of opportunities that you give for our kids. And so for me, one of the things as I've worked there, I've always wanted to make sure, Alan, you know how I hustle to make sure that our kids have the same things in North Minneapolis that other kids have at the suburban school. We're going to look the same way. And I tell our kids, for me, my favorite movie, Remember the Titans, and I tell our kids all the time, we're going to look like champions, we're going to walk like champions, we're going to talk like champions. And even if we don't get there, we're going to get close enough to be the best that we can be. But you got to, and so sometimes I said that about the fear of success. So that means that sometimes we as adults in the community, we got to believe in them before they learn to believe in themselves. And a big thing for me is what I've learned is I tell all too often, we got to help our kids set goals. And every time and I like what I say mini goals, we celebrate their success. So many of our kids are coming up in embarrassment. It goes back to what I'm saying, you can't be what you don't see. So we have to expose them. But to me, our biggest challenge in this education system is the bar is so low. They don't believe that our kids are college materials. And then they use those test results, in my opinion, to say to the state, to say to the world, see, I told you so. They can't read. They can't do math. They can't do science. Right? And so the young teachers that are being educated by the broader system, they go into those classrooms believing what they've read or been told, that our kids are incapable, right? But again, and so I've seen, young men. I've seen, the thing about like people talk about, black boys not one of the biggest, happiest moments in my life is when grades come out, is seeing my players post their report card on social media about how proud they are of their academic achievement.
Wow.
And why? Because we've made it a part of the culture that it's okay to be smart, that you can be, that living out the true meaning of being a student first and an athlete second. But in my opinion is right now, I mean, unfortunately, the people that, many times, I mean, I walk into the classroom, they let kids put their head on the desk. They feel sorry for them because of their situation. You know what I'm saying? We didn't have that. We talked about the educators that was in our lives. That was unacceptable. I know you had a rough night. And I tell kids all the time, and I say this without, I'm searching for the word, but without any apologies. Mm-hmm. I know my grandmother told me that there's nothing new under the sun. Mm-hmm. Right? So no matter what your situation, you're not the first one. You're not the first kid that don't know his daddy. You're not the first one on welfare. You're not the first one that's living in a rental house. You're not the first one that don't have a car. So let's get rid of the excuses and let's get us a plan on how we're going to change your life and how you're going to change your family life. That's been my motto in terms of the way I approach it and I believe that you can do it. First thing I tell, Al, I have this thing when I walk into a room with young people, I say this. This is what I say. If I could change your mind, I could change your life. This is the greatest computer that's ever been invented. And the maker of this computer is a perfectionist. So that tells me that there's nothing wrong with the hardware. It's the software. It's what's being put in, the programming. And if you allow me to change the programming, I could change your life.
Well, it seems to me it's a question in part, Coach McKenzie, of demonstrating the connection, the truth that you discovered as you visited the continent. And that is that every child speaks 5 languages. right? And so if a child can speak 5 languages there, they can speak 5 languages here. And those languages might be literal spoken languages, but they might be the language of music, the language of science, the language of medicine, all of which are languages, right? And so the capacity exists, but somehow we have to ensure, as you are doing, that we recognize this capacity, this innate ability, the native genius of every child. Speak to it and call it forth. Call it forth, address that, and operate at that plane with every child. What do you think?
I 100% agree with you. You know, I use this. I mean, when I get an opportunity to do some professional development, I often go around the room and ask the teachers that don't look like us to say, if I was to give you a lump of coal, what would you do with it? And many times they respond, I don't know. And I tell them that that's what happened every day when our kids walk into their buildings. They're like a lump of coal. And if you know coal is dark, it's city, it's combustible. So sometimes you're going to have some behavior problems and all of those kind of things. But I also know through my own personal experience of 40 years of pouring into the life of Black boys and Black girls, that if you create a system, that they also have the potential to be diamonds. They have the potential to become that lump of coal that you don't know what to do with, has the potential to what you just said, to be a doctor, to be a lawyer, to be a politician, to own a newspaper, to be a great coach, all of those kind of things. But again, it's how you see it.
Larry McKenzie, thank you, brother. So good to see you. What a wonderful conversation. And congratulations on your retiring from this career. What's your next career going to be? What's the next step for you?
Well, you know what? So right now, I'm finishing up a master's degree. I'm working on a couple books. And what I'm going to do from here, I'm going to take all this wisdom and knowledge that I've acquired over the last 40 years, and I'm going to coach coaches. I'm going to duplicate and replicate and create other Larry McKenzies and Laura McKenzies, but I'm going to coach coaches.
Getting ready to ask, how do we clone you? That was my last question. I raised 2 athletes as a single mother, and I know. I just sent the coach, Al Hobson, who was her sprint coach. She was 5th in the nation in the 200. And I told him, thank you. It was his 80th birthday, and I just wanted to acknowledge the fact of everything he did for my oldest daughter. And then the other one had a tennis coach that was the same. So I know, but we need to clone you. And I think the best thing to hear is that you're going to teach other coaches to have that passion and have that heart, because these kids can do. They are capable. We thought we were tough. Right. Couldn't anyone tell us in 1957 that we weren't tough? We didn't even think about it. It wasn't a second thought, because we had ministers, we had counselors who prepared us starting very early. I mean, we had it all. So congratulations. I just know what men like you mean to young people who are raised with, because eventually they had relationships with their fathers, but it was the coaches and my father that were there. So
well, thank you.
Kudos to you, and the best of luck with whatever you choose. But I hope it really, really sticks with the other coaches, because they need to hear your messages. I'm just mesmerized just sitting up here hearing you. So,
Diana, final comments or thoughts, impressions?
We're just kind of speechless. It was so beautiful.
like Brenda, I'm wondering, how do we clone someone like Larry? Because every kid that's born has got so much potential, and we cannot waste it. Ever.
Brenda, what are your thoughts?
I just want to say, my friend, thank you for coming on the show today. And I know this is not the last that we will be hearing from you. you will be out here. We will be calling you.
Oh, yes,
So pick up the phone when you see my phone number.
And Diana, thank you for your story of your father.
Yeah.
That was phenomenal.
Yeah. No
what a man.
Yeah.
What a man, what a man, what a man.
Yeah, no problem.
Brother Larry, thank you, man. We'll see you. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you all tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.